And now, Smriti Vidyat is going to be talking about climate innovations and solutions. Smriti?
Larry, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody, and indeed welcome to this session on climate innovations and solutions. As Larry said, my name is Smriti Vidyarthi, and I will be leading this session. Now, during this Kusi Festival, we have been reminded that we are indeed in a climate crisis. And if we do not act now, the consequences will be catastrophic. And we already are seeing catastrophes across Kenya, the region, and the world. And while all that may be true, well, there is another reality. And that reality is a positive one. That reality is things are happening on the ground. People are working to turn environmental problems into solutions. And it may be step by step, day by day, but it is happening, and that is ultimately partly what is going to help us win this climate fight. So that is what the discussion is about this afternoon, innovations and solutions. And joining me to discuss this is Dr. Patrick Omeja. He is on my far left. He is the field manager at the Biological Field Station at Makerere University in Uganda. Karibu sana, thanks for making it all the way from there. Joining us virtually online, we have Alice Rueza, the Africa Region Director at WWF International. That's the World Wildlife Fund. Alice, good to have you with us. Thank you. And we have Professor Mbabu Matthew. He is the CEO of the Green Blue Foundation based here in Kenya. Beside him is Yvonne Nyokabi. She is a climate change specialist at UNDP Kenya. That's the United Nations Development Program. And on my immediate left, welcome to Reshma Shah, the Director of Sustainability Equity Group. Thank you all so much for joining us. Alice, you're with us virtually, but I would in fact like to start with you. And we'll start with a global perspective. And I want to find out where we are globally when it comes to prioritizing climate solutions. Now, COP27 closed with a commitment to establishing a fund to provide support and compensate vulnerable nations with, for loss and damage. And of course, that was seen as a win. But in your view, was COP27 somewhat of a letdown when it came to prioritizing solutions and mitigations, particularly for the African continent?
Thank you very much. That is absolutely a very important question. And I think there have been so many narratives about COP27 and whether it was successful or not. I think it's useful to take stock of when we were going there, what did we want to achieve? And then what did we achieve? And I remember very well, Africa had set priorities on a loss and damage. The loss and damage fund was important for us. On action, because as a continent that only contributes 3 to 4% of greenhouse gas emissions, we really want to address adaptation. We do not necessarily have to address mitigation, even though it is important. We know that our people are suffering from climate change. We saw Madagascar with a climate-induced famine. We saw catastrophic floods in Cameroon and Durban. We know Kenya here where we live, there's a huge drought that's been going on. So we are very vulnerable, and yet we do not contribute much. And it was important for us to go there with a story on adaptation, and especially special needs and circumstances. Finance was another one that we went there to discuss, and we really wanted, first and foremost, the pledge of 100 billion that has never been met. And we also wanted more and more finance because the vulnerabilities are increasing. We have COVID, we have conflict, we knew there's more and more need. We wanted to talk about nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions had been recognized at COP26 in Glasgow as an important player in climate change. And Africa has those solutions because Africa has a quarter of the world's biodiversity. So we wanted to go there and make sure that point was had. And lastly, we also wanted to talk about energy, renewable energy, because as much as we may talk about innovations in energy, there was a discussion around gas and everything. Africa still has a lot of renewable energy potential. We still have 600 million people who lack access to energy. It was important for us to come up with solutions around energy. So how did we do? First and foremost, on adaptation, we actually had a decision that is urging developed countries to urgently and significantly scale up their provision to climate finance. And there was a request for the Standing Committee on Finance to double adaptation. And there were new pledges of 335.6 million as adaptation finance. So we didn't do as badly as it sounds, although of course the devil is always in the details. I think your previous panel was talking about how money finally reaches the ground. So on finance, there was also the establishment of the Global Shield Against Risk by the G7 and the V20. Again, more and more funding pledged there with various countries. The Adaptation Fund received more pledges of 230 million. There was another 105.6 million in new funding. So not perfect for sure. We haven't received everything, but there were some pledges in there. The big win was the Loss and Damage Fund. 30 years after this came on the agenda, finally, we got it to be a main discussion point. And you know what? We also got the fund. The fund was accepted. The funding arrangements will have to be figured out. But you know what? At least we can say politically, we got a big political win. The details will have to be worked out. On food and agriculture, which actually was one of the points we also wanted to have there, recognizing agriculture and the main role it plays in our economies as a big employer, as the GDP, we wanted to make sure we had a work program on agriculture. And actually, globally, the data shows that even if we remove all the dirty vehicles off the road, if we do not tackle food systems, we are still not going to achieve the 1.5. So agriculture is a big one, and we wanted it on. We didn't win much here. There is something on the text, but we are not very, very happy. Energy, yes, the just transition, extremely important, because as we move from coal in some countries to cleaner energy, we need to make sure that the people who are dependent on coal for their jobs have a just transition. But we need more investments and more innovations in energy. Last one that is important to my heart is nature-based solutions. I work for WWF. Of course, our vision is to create a world where nature and people live in harmony. Africa has the biodiversity. By protecting our nature-based solutions, our oceans, our forests, we do contribute to 37% of the solution to climate change. So that was COP27. Mixed success, but I also want to say it's not all doom and gloom. And I think the point you're trying to make in your earlier discussion that the action is on the ground. The action is not at COP. COP, we do the talk, it's important, but the action is on the ground. I think Africa has the solutions and Africa has a role to play here.
That's right. Thanks, Alice. So some big wins, some half wins, and perhaps some losses in some people's views. But as you say, the action is on the ground. So let's bring the conversation back to the ground and take everyone to Uganda. Patrick, that is where you are. And despite some of these successes and failures, if you like, at COP, on the ground, we are seeing countrywide and worldwide so many innovations. Right here in Kenya, we're seeing clean cooking and different methods of clean stoves. We're also seeing innovations when it comes to biogas solutions. But in Uganda, you are working closely with forests, and you're in fact turning weed, which ordinarily would be thrown out, into something very useful that's helping fight climate change. Explain what exactly you're doing and how it's working.
Thank you, Smithy. I bring you greetings from Makerere University, and I want to thank Nation Media for this invitation. I have three major places of intervention that we are looking at a family level. That is from my home, where I manage as a head of a family, 0.05 hectare. If you look at a football field, let me bring it into perspective, is like 1/5 part of a football field. Then at the family level, we have around 100 size football field size, and then at the place where we work at the university, we have a restoration program happening in an area which is 10,000 hectares. So you're looking at over 1,000, football fields. And so this is the kind of areas where we're doing interventions. And at the family level is okay. It's a small area where you can, manage without much trouble. But as the areas become bigger, that is where the trouble comes in. So in this area, which is 10,000 hectares that we are restoring with effort from other agencies, including Uganda Wildlife Authority, that is a custodian of that area, is a national park. You do the tree planting, and then all of a sudden, other challenges come up. So we have invasive weed species that have come up, and then destroying the vegetation that you planted. So what our organization is doing is to make you, instead of just cutting this weed and discard it, they're turning this weed into briquettes to help the local people make better use of it instead of just throwing it away. And it has been taken up, although it's still at a very slow scale because people are not used to that kind of arrangement, that setup. So we are now going into a level where we are expanding it to make it really bigger, and so that people get income also out of it.
Can you explain further on how the briquettes are helping the community and the environment as well?
So what happens with the briquettes is these are shrubs which are growing under the trees. So these shrubs originally, because when the restoration effort was being done, they needed woody biomass that accumulates quite a bit of carbon. That is the major goal of that project. So the weeds, which is also biomass as such, but is very low carbon level. So they had to get rid of it, and so what is done is cut, compressed into small manageable levels, and then that is what is sold out to the communities who, actually for the local communities around the park is given to them freely, but for other people, because now people in the cities have also realized it can be used, and so for that, at that scale they sell it, but it's still at a very low level compared to like an amount that someone would pay to get a bag of charcoal. And remember, this is really uniformly compact biomass, so it's even better than the amount of money, gives you value for money than what somebody ideally would pay to buy charcoal and use in the households. And so it gives better value for money, and also a better way, to get rid of the weeds under the plants that have been planted.
Okay, and you said it's at a small scale at this point, but you do plan to go big, but there are some challenges, and we'll come to that later on in this discussion. Thank you. Professor, the Green Blue Foundation here in Kenya, well, one of its missions is to restore Africa, or to have a restored Africa, and your organization is working in many different ways, particularly with citizens, to ensure that this actually happens through various innovations. For example, the 1 square meter project. Take us through what is actually working and what you're doing.
Thank you, Smlit. Let me start by thanking Nation Media Group for organizing this forum. I would also like to, at this point, to mention our other partners, that is Family Bank, the Family Group Foundation. I would also like to mention we're working also with the government, particularly Kenya Forest Service. We have an MOU with them. Kenya Water Towers Agency, and some other even private partners. We have our own list of partners. The reason I'm saying this is that we cannot do it alone. We need to work with other partners. Having said that, I would like to sort of redefine some terms so that we are all on the same page. And even I may not be able to say everything, but what we are doing because of time limitations, but we have some brochures and we have some of our GBFA staff here who can actually distribute the brochures if it's okay for people to see exactly what we are doing. Now, the terms I want to sort of redefine is one, here we have talked about mindset change. And it's a key thing, I agree with that. For a mindset change to occur, we need to unlearn some things so that we can learn new things. Now, some of the things we need to unlearn is doing business as usual. Because if we are actually going to be out of the box, we need to do business as usual. That's one. How do we do that? The new innovations we are talking about. And climate change, I would say, is actually one of the environmental crises we have. It's an urgent one because it's like a house on fire and we have to act immediately. Now, of course, the other crisis we have is biodiversity loss, waste pollution, and also health. And that is what the environment is about. Now, I also want to mention that we have been talking about ecosystems. We need to unlearn or learn that we are part of the ecosystems as human beings. When we mention the word ecosystem, we tend to think or imagine we are outside that. We are not. We are part of that ecosystem. And for a healthy ecosystem, everything must be functioning well and together. And that is what is called ecosystem health. Now, coming back home, I'm zeroing back to the point. I want to say that we are all connected. Everything is connected. People are connected to the human race biologically. People are connected to the earth chemically. And people are connected to the universe atomically. Those are subjects by themselves. The point is, everything is connected, we are all connected. Listening to the conversations here, it reminds me of the story of the blind men who are touching the elephant. And one says the elephant is a big blanket, another one says it's a tree, whatever. So my point is, all the things we are talking about are connected. And we need to think of them holistically as one. Okay, coming to GBFA. GBFA is, our main business is restoration. Right. Restoration of the degraded environment. In Africa, we have about 60% ASOS. In Kenya, we have 89%. That translates to 1.67 billion hectares in Africa. In Kenya, we are talking of about 41.2 million hectares of restoration to be done. And this restoration, we are focusing on tree growing. That's another narrative we need to change. Planting a tree is good, but it's like giving birth to a baby and you leave it. Who nurtures the baby? That's where the tree growing comes in. we don't plant coffee, we grow coffee or any other crop. That's how we should think of tree growing. The reason we do that, of course, we do tree growing and soil restoration. And all these issues have been mentioned here, the importance of soil restoration, the importance of trees. But I would like to remind ourselves about especially the trees. Why tree growing? The first thing we do and the last thing we do when we come into this world and the last thing we do when we exit the world is breathe. Take the first breath, last breath. And that is why trees, because that is oxygen and it is what sustains us.
And if you could also just speak to the 1 square meter restoration model, because that is linked to the tree growing.
Yes, thank you, I'll do that. Now, it seems that as human beings, we forget, and it's okay to forget. We forget that the reason we are alive is because we are breathing, and we know what we are breathing is oxygen. It comes from trees. So we need to grow those trees. We find agriculture is based on soil, farming. We need those soils. We don't need our topsoil going to the Indian Ocean because the Indian Ocean doesn't need it. It's us who need it. Now, the next one is, so if that is the case, then the next thing is water. For your information, 2 minutes without breathing, you know what happens. For water, it's about 10 to 14 days. Food comes third, further, and actually, about 2 months without food, you still be alive. So I'm trying to center us, to give us the reason why we should think through growing, soil restoration, always and constantly. Now, for the other thing that has been talked about here a lot is financing, and I'm coming to the square meter.
Right, and if you could just make it a bit brief, because I've got to get to the other panels.
Financing has been another elephant in the room here. And like the last COP27, loss and damage, we were also told that that money will come or will be available in 5 to 10 years from now. So what do we do between now and 10 years before we get the money? Climate action is now, and it can only be done by citizens. So for GBFA, we are doing restoration, yes, and our focus is citizen-driven initiatives so that the citizens own that, and actually they are the custodians, they are the beneficiaries, they are the people who actually can reverse the climate change effect. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I want to shift to you, Yvonne, and speak to technology innovations. Now, the UNDP is in fact supporting and investing such innovations, but tell us how technology innovations work to save us from climate change, essentially, and can you give us concrete examples of these?
Thank you very much, Smriti, and thank you to all the panelists and the NTV for having us for this important conversation. As we all know, technology is a facilitator of human life, isn't it? But technology has previously been the cause of climate change because of greenhouse gas emissions. As such, technology innovations must meet two needs. It must reduce the amount of emissions we are releasing to our atmosphere, but also build the resilience of our communities and our ecosystems, which we are part of, to climate change. And so UNDP has been working, we work across 170 countries, but here in Kenya, one of the things that we try and do is, one, create a policy, support government to create an enabling environment so that these technologies can find their way into this country. There was a question on those who are manufacturing and want to bring in technologies to reduce their energy costs that is sustainable. We want to have technologies that reduce our water costs, which are good for climate change. But if there's prohibitive policy, then those technologies never find their way into the country. And so we support government and have supported government in their policy regime to ensure that the regulatory framework in the country is such that it enables technology transfer into the country. The other way is on the issue of finance, which has been one of the main subjects, I think, at Kusi. I'd actually call Kusi Climate Finance Ideas Festival. But finance, of course, is required so that we can purchase the technologies for both those who want to bring it in, but also those who want to use the technology. And so one of the things that we try and do is create innovative financing models so that those who want to participate, for instance, in tree restoration, forest restoration, land restoration, change their industrial processes to become low-tech, low-carbon, we find the ways of innovating financial models that will enable them to use what they currently have in their pockets, but also find financing that can top that up so that they're able to bring these technologies. I'll give you an example. Currently, we are working on cold storage solutions. And we all know the globe is heating up. For Kenya, we have 40% food loss from farms because of poor post-harvest management. And so what we find is our farmers actually pay people to get rid of harvest that doesn't make it to the market. That's a source of methane emissions. So by cold storage, we provide these farmers, small-scale farmers, a chance to be able to, one, store their produce for longer, not sell it at a glut price, which will mean that they make less money, but also have that food somewhere in storage so that it can also move to other parts of the country and to markets. And we find that these solutions are multi-pronged in their impact because one, for that farmer, it means that they have more produce to sell, means more income for them and their households, but also for the climate, it means that we have less emissions. So we see ourselves as providing an integrated approach to technology transfer here in Kenya.
Okay, thank you. Rashma, it seems like a lot of this is about the money. Where is it, and is it being put in the right place? So from where you sit as a financial institution, what are some of the trends that you're seeing when it comes to green financing here in Kenya and also in the region?
Thanks, Vita. It's on. It is on, yeah, great. And thanks to the Nation Media Group and all the sponsors for bringing us together. I think this is a very important discussion, and I can see a lot on finance as well coming up. But in terms of the trend, I think we're seeing quite a varied trend. It started out, a lot of the discussions was around renewables. You know, that was the big discussion around climate, and everybody focused around energy side. We're now seeing the shift away from not just the larger projects into some of the smaller projects and some of the household elements as well. And that's probably because of the way innovations are going and solutions are coming. A big part of what we're seeing, especially around adaptation, is around agriculture. Infrastructure is another big one there. Water and nature. A lot of discussions around nature at the moment. But things are also moving into some of the less tangible, the things that were not seen as commercial or needing to financing. A lot of discussion around reforestation, around carbon markets and things like that. So I think what we're saying is the trends are moving, and they're moving very fast. And probably everything else that needs to move with it is not moving fast enough to match that.
Okay, and we'll come back to how you are meeting some of those trends and supporting them as well as a financial institution. Patrick, when it comes to the money, when we spoke earlier, you did mention that funding or financing is a hindrance, and it is a challenge, especially when it comes to the project that you're working on. Talk us through some of the challenges and what you would expect from perhaps governments or the private sector as well when it comes to supporting innovations like yours.
Thank you. So what is happening at the moment, we found that actually harvesting and turning these briquettes into these products work. So getting it out into a bigger production level is where we are at the moment. But even at that small scale is working. And then we got a couple of support from IDRSC and then the Forest Absorbing Carbon Emissions Program that have invested into getting these innovations like to another level. But also the communities that have been involved in raising these seedlings are also being empowered so that some of the ideas they got during the training program of, nursery setup and plantation raising. So all this is being rolled out into the community so that, they take advantage of the skills they learned to raise their own nurseries of these seedlings and also get market out there, because there are so many people who want to raise the trees, but they don't want to set up the seedlings, nurseries.
Right. And so essentially you're saying that the communities are being part of the solution. How important is that? That must make a big difference.
This area is surrounded by, like forests, protected areas actually is basically an island. You find a park and then on either side, there are communities. So the labor force, we are talking of over 1,000 manpower involved in planting and raising the seedlings are sourced from the community. It's only maybe at the technical level that we find foresters coming from outside, but the low-skill manpower is sought from the community. And now the project does not raise its nurseries. The communities are the ones now raising seedlings that the projects buy, and then we use it to restore these places. And when the money finally comes, it will not, this money now will not go to another community, because the indigenous tree species are already raised by the individual communities. They have active nurseries. So during the planting time, they only go to these communities and say, okay, we need maybe 1 million seedlings. And so the money goes to them, and then the seedling goes into the planting area or to other people who need it.
Okay.
So there's that circle. So the money is actually coming into them, not going out.
Right. Okay, let me bring Alice back into this conversation. Alice, joining us virtually, if you can hear me, you talked about nature-based solutions, and that was close to your heart. Tell us why nature-based solutions are so critical in this climate fight. And also, talk to us about how we ensure that there is a link between the mega commitments and the talks that we are hearing to action at the grassroots.
Great. No, thank you so much. So nature-based solutions, of course, are 37% of the solution that's going to get us to 1.5, which is the commitment we've all made. But unfortunately, they've always been the forgotten solution. And because of that, they only receive like 2% of
and why,
the finance.
let me interject and ask you why, yes, if it's so important, why is that the forgotten solution?
Because of course, I mean, I should simply say the climate discourse from the beginning was happening at a very, very much higher level. And it was always about the cars, the emissions. Clearly, there's a lot of interest in reducing emissions from the big emitters, the United States, your China, your Brazil, and everybody. And everybody is looking at reducing greenhouse gas emissions from fuel consumption. That was always where the big focus was. But issues like nature-based solutions were not really being seen, because I don't feel like we were at the same table in terms of talking about these solutions. But look at us. We have the Congo Basin. That is the second largest carbon sink in the entire world, only behind the Amazon. We have the Cuvette peatland, which is the world's largest tropical peatland. It's the only carbon sink we have that we can use. And it provides that solution. And that solution is not just for the people of the Congo Basin or Africa, it's global. It's a global solution. So it's extremely important that we continue to do that. Secondly, the vulnerability is here. This is where the people are feeling the most impacts from floods, from sea level rise, from droughts and others. And these are also communities that happen to be the custodians and the stewards of nature. That is where the nature is happening, where the communities are. They are the best stewards. And therefore, it is important that we are involving them in this discussion and that they are engaged in this, whether it's restoration. It is important that, because when you look at the AFR 100, the Africa Forest Landscape Restoration Initiative, excellent political commitment by our African governments to restore over 100 million hectares. But where is that work going to happen? It can only happen on the ground. And so when you see some of these solutions that the innovations can only happen at our level, at the level where nature is at the level where communities are living near national parks, and that's giving them the benefits for being involved in the protection of the gorillas. We really must have that area where people and nature are living in harmony. We will not achieve these solutions at a high level. We can go to Brazil and reduce emissions. We can do that in the United States. But unless we work on the ground with the communities living near the Congo forest and making sure they are benefiting from them, their rights are held, they have access to the forest, we will not be able to protect that forest. And yet it is such an important carbon sink for the rest of the world.
And are we seeing enough of that connection? Are we on the right track?
We are on the right track. We have excellent examples. Look at Mukuru Stoves. They just won the Earthshot Prize.
Right.
I was just amazed what they've done with that. And look, they talked about they're only reaching a certain level of communities, but with the prize, they're going to reach 1 million households. Now, what we need is to support them to reach 1 billion households. We are seeing a lot of good examples. We need scale. We need scale. We need to support people. We need our small businesses. We need innovation. Look at it at agriculture. Organizations like the CGIAR are producing drought-resistant varieties. We have excellent innovations across Africa, but the speed and scale of adoption isn't there yet. So we need our governments to put in place that enabling environment so that we can adopt these varieties, so that our yields can increase, our productivity can increase. And if our productivity increases, we'll be converting much less forest for agriculture, and our forest will remain standing as a carbon sink and a solution to climate change. So yes, we're seeing some. We just need scale.
Okay, and as we wait for governments to act, well, we can't just sit back. We still need to act ourselves. So Patrick, I beg your pardon, Professor, I will come back to you. And of course, as Alice said, nature-based solutions are key. And I just do want you to speak more to that 1 square meter restoration model that the Green Blue Foundation, has implemented. Can you please tell us what exactly that is and how it is working to fight climate change as a nature-based solution? It's on.
Thank you. 1 square meter restoration model. That's a concept. That's a financing mechanism. It is derived from the figures that I mentioned earlier. Like if we take Kenya, 89% arid, semi-arid, and degraded lands, including forest landscapes. That translates to 41.2 million hectares for restoration. And if we look at the budget for restoring that, we did all these calculations. It came to like 43.1 trillion Kenya shillings. And we were like, wow, this one, it's even more than the government budget. So how do we get around to this? So we were tasked by our board. Can you tell us how much it would cost to do a square meter? So we did our calculations, and it's like $3 would take care of restoration per square meter. $3. That's in current exchange rate about 360, 400 Kenya shillings. And this is it's key, it is critical because every citizen can actually participate in this. Now, the output of that is now the citizen mobilization or initiative. Basically, the square meter is a mobilization tool for citizens to to take charge of the environment or to restore the environment, and it is also a financing model where we now created a platform that people can sponsor or buy tokens to restore 1 square meter. And that's so that every citizen is able to participate in this, not only in the actual growing of the seedling, but also in financing it. So we are saying let people do it themselves. Then we state the other thing that has been talked about is unemployment or lack of jobs. Citizens can actually earn their money restoring the environment, and they also can put money in their pocket. So in this platform, it has a bonus system, whereby when you people, okay, let me say it has two sections. There are people where, if you look at our website, you can actually sponsor the square meters directly, or one-off, as many as you want, at $3 per square meter. But there are those other people who would like to earn some money, or they need an incentive to take care of the environment because of course, their financial poverty issues and that. So that is where the bonus system comes in, that they join GBFA, they buy square meters, and then introduce people to introduce their family and friends, and then they who also join and sponsor some square meters. The minimum is 10 for logistical purposes, 10 square meters. So it's like 4,000 Kenya shillings for anybody to join and participate. And after you bring in 5 people, you earn $50 back to yourself. And then GBFA uses the remaining money for the restoration purposes. And we are starting with public spaces, minery, especially water catchment areas, for the reasons that we have mentioned.
Right. Thank you. So one key thing is that it really does require everyone, each citizen, to play their part. Yvonne, when it comes to innovations, we are seeing a lot of them in the urban centers. We're not seeing enough in the more arid areas, perhaps for obvious reasons, but what is being done to cascade those innovations to the more vulnerable communities who are ultimately the hardest hit currently by climate change?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Indeed, UNDP this week, I think it was, released a report on mapping the innovation ecosystems, and we found that 45% of innovation centers are actually located in Nairobi. And for all of us, we know that when there's a drought, when there's a flood, Nairobi gets hit, but a lot of the people who are most vulnerable live in our arid and semi-arid lands, live in the poorer areas of our cities, and those are the vulnerable people. So as we talk about innovations, we have to contextualize it in the fact that we are all connected, as Prof said. Climate change causes 3 to 5% losses in our GDP annually. This year we are suffering from a drought, and we have to dig deeper to ensure that the pastoralist communities that live in the arid and semi-arid lands have access to food because they're suffering from malnutrition. So then how do we get them to participate in this conversation? What we are seeing now is models that are bottom-up, empowering citizens at their places so that they can make and design solutions that are within their contexts, and empowering them with the finance to do that. So locally led solutions. What we've seen with this is that citizens have become more empowered to start thinking, how will I, for instance, a pastoralist, manage my grazing system so that I have fodder and pasture in case there's a drought? And so they come up with solutions that are within their context, but they are also empowered with the finance to be able to do that. So locally led adaptation. And so what we've seen them do is participate in decision making, also put together their own financing to be able to participate in this type of solutions. And so this is the models that are becoming more and more popular, even in climate financing trends here in the country. So that's how citizens are now being seen as participants in local innovation solutions.
Okay, and Rashma, I bring you into this now on the topic of financing. As a financial institution, or from the financial services, how are you supporting these innovators, these people who are trying to turn environmental problems into solutions? How are you supporting people to start operating in a climate smart sort of way?
So if I was to summarize what we're doing, it's based on our strategy, which is the Africa Recovery and Resilience Plan. And this plan is based on Africa using its own natural resources to catalyze industrialization in a way that provides social and environmental transformation. As part of that, our focus is, a large part of that is MSMEs. 65% we want of that to be MSMEs. The reason I say it's based on that is we spend a lot of time engaging on that plan. Not just in the region, not in the region we operate in, but internationally. So we did the keynote speech at the Commonwealth dinner earlier this week in the UK. We've done trips to the US. We've done trade missions, Uganda, Vietnam. The driver for all this is, one, get funding channeled through the institution, because a lot of the organizations that we're working with cannot directly access that funding. But they can channel it through us in terms of, one, being able to access it, trying to get the right risk down, so trying to get the right guarantees, the credit guarantees that can back up. But more than that, a lot of the discussions are around bringing the right partners on board, bringing them in country, into the region, so that they can support the innovation processes that are being done. We've had over 2 trips that have been focused specifically around technology and innovation around technology. But the other aspect that we usually negotiate with the funding is technical assistance. And this technical assistance, some of it is directly to the bank, but a majority of it is actually to the customers. So like climate smart agriculture is a big part of it. Some of the things and the partnerships we've been talking about, there's been partnerships around the blue economy discussions, partnerships around the cold storage as well, partnership around getting some manufacturing of batteries, so that we are looking at clean energy. So these are some of the examples of things that we're working with. But we don't just stop there. The other thing that we have is a twin engine model. So we work very closely with the foundation, the Equity Group Foundation, and my colleagues from the foundation are here. What that allows us to do is really what we were talking about before: engage with the end user, the customers, the community, understand the real issues. So the solutions that we're looking at range from your large corporates and your renewable energy and your operating efficiencies, all the way to the clean energy cooking. So that's a big part. Another way we're doing is around the fact that if we are operating with a company that is like a mining company or an extractives company, then we work with them in terms of engaging with the community around, in terms of social, but in terms of what are they doing around environmental transformation. And we are able, through our branch network, to actually reach a large community base that way, to put that communication out. So if you like, we're taking it at different layers in terms of getting the financing, getting the technology, getting the innovation, de-risking, education capacity building, and that's really how we're trying to do more than just provide funding.
Okay, all right, interesting. Thank you. Alice from WWF, there is no way that I can let this conversation end without putting the question to you about what is being done to protect our wildlife from climate change. We have seen right here in Kenya before our eyes over 1,000 animals dying as a result of the drought that is, of course, linked to climate change. So what role is WWF playing in scaling up efforts, but also finding solutions and innovations that will protect this country's wildlife?
I know that is a big question in terms of that, but before I go into that, I didn't want to re-emphasize the point on locally led adaptations. I really liked that, and the fact that we need to create that, we need to de-risk the investments, because I think there's a lot of money out there that is very interested in investing in Africa, but we're still being seen as a very high-risk environment. And I think I like what Equity is talking about around trying to de-risk those investments. And I do want to call out a new fund, the Iremia Fund by the Rwanda government, that is also doing that on really supporting local innovation and de-risking it. So wildlife and climate change, it is very sad what is happening in terms of the droughts. And I think we need to go back to what other solutions to reduce the impacts of climate change. And of course, there is the mitigation side where we need to keep our forests standing so that it can sink those emissions. That's important. But there's also the locally led adaptation and really being able to support them. I happen to believe that the solutions for drought exist within the communities that are living with drought more than with WWF as a global organization. But we need to support these communities and to put in place those locally led adaptation measures. Whether it's about reducing the current capacity, whether it's about restoring that rangeland ecosystem so that the cattle are healthier, so whether it's about enabling the migrations and making sure those are happening, whether it's water, boreholes and water for wildlife. There's a lot of, but I actually feel that those communities that have lived in these places for millions of years, that live with this and look after cattle, have the solutions. But we must empower them. We must support them to innovate and put those solutions in place. And that's why I support the locally led adaptation idea that we were talking about. I actually feel like, yes, as WWF, we will continue to advocate for finance. We will continue to advocate for climate change, mitigation and adaptation. But I really think the action and the solutions sit on the ground in those communities, and we must support them.
Okay, well, Patrick, let me bring you into this now because you, of course, work closely with communities. So in your view, how can people, communities be empowered to be part of this climate conversation and to find solutions? What needs to be done to empower them? Because for the longest time, climate change seemed like something foreign to many of us until it actually hit hard. And now everybody is feeling the effects of climate change, whether you live in the village or whether you live in Nairobi or the United States. So what needs to be done? How can people be empowered?
Thank you, Smith. One major thing with the tree planting initiative that we have in place is like everyone is saying, we don't have enough land. And sometimes the land cover that, somebody wants to plant maybe doesn't belong to him or her. And so that is the challenge, is that where you've given me all these seedlings, where do I plant to mitigate? But from my own experiences, you don't actually need a whole, football field to grow your trees. You can start from the backyard. So even if you have a typical residential home size land in Uganda, can accommodate maybe some 2 trees within the compound. But then from there you scale it up. There are communities that, they have community lands. So there are policies in place that allow, how to regulate use of resources in that land. So the more resources, the more in terms of money that we would need to put back the damage in place. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patrick. If from where you sit, as you make your closing remarks, I'd like to put the question: Hub can be an example to the Horn of Africa as you close.
Yeah, I mean, Kenya has been really an early bloomer on climate technologies in many ways, but that's for Africa. We still lag behind globally. And so for us, we have several lessons that we have to offer, not just the Horn of Africa, I think the whole of Africa and the world. And I think for us, we need to open up our spaces more to share forums like this where we can share our ideas, our lessons, so that they are not made in other countries, and also take ourselves to those countries to share our technologies. But let me close by saying that climate change is not only a technology innovation issue. It needs innovation around our financing models, and I think that has been emphasized a lot. We need innovations around social innovations to change our behavior, so that we also have a value system that really appreciates our ecosystem health. We also need business models to change. And I'll close by saying private sector has invested heavily. You have assets, you have human skill and capabilities that you have. It's as we face this emergency, it's important that private sector disrupts before they get disrupted. We saw what the pandemic did to us. We can get ahead of this game now that we know what is coming to us. Thanks.
Thank you, Yvonne. Professor, over to you as you give us your last words. Can you also just remind us, because I know your organization focuses a lot on citizens' contribution, remind us what it is that each one of us can do as individuals in our everyday life to fight climate change, without waiting for the government, without necessarily planting trees, although that is very important. But aside from that, what else can we do?
Thank you. In terms of citizen participation, we have initiatives, and these are focused to what people can do even as individuals or as a family. Number one, we have the trees for birthdays. And it happens like today, actually, one of our board members, Caroline, is having a birthday, and we propose to plant some seedlings here in Karura. Will be shown where.
Happy
to
birthday.
Celebrate her birthday.
Caroline, where are you?
Yes.
There you go, in the pink. Happy birthday. What a great way to spend the day.
Yes. Then we have trees for celebrating for mothers. Trees for mothers, it was mentioned yesterday. Then we have Youth Conservation Corps, or Youth Corps for Conservation. It's a youth movement where youth participate in growing trees. We also have trees for men. Men traditionally have been the custodians of the environment and the value chains that come from that. We have that program too. We also have the trees for corporates, or by corporates, for their CSR and carbon footprint. And we also have alumni trees, or doing trees where you graduated from and all that kind of thing. So these are organized. We are partnering with institutions that are like universities to do that, use the alumni to grow trees. And most important is that GBFA is well positioned, because most of the people, tree growing is actually not their core business. For us, if you really would like to grow trees, come to us. We partner. We'll do the tree growing for you. We have enough space because we are in partnership with the government and all that. So space is not a constraint. Now, challenges would be the finance, the trick of finance, I'll call it, and then, of course, low awareness of citizens. So our CDI model also involves a lot of education, because we have to work with the local communities and educate them on why they are restoring the environment, It's important and it is their responsibility, and they take it up. So my parting shot, let's do it. We can do it, and let's do it for ourselves and for nature. After all, we are part of nature. When we say nature, we are part of it. We are not outside of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Reshma, to you, your closing remarks, and really what does the future look like when it comes to green financing?
So in terms of the future for green financing, I'm hoping after the COP and all the noise that was made about commitments not being met, that money will actually start flowing. So for example, the Green Climate Fund has made commitments where you don't only have to be accredited as an organization, you could get certain projects accredited. So they're looking at certain ways in which they can reduce the administrative or the access to it. So I'm hoping the future means a lot more money flowing through. Also looking at it being a lot more in terms of not just pure green, but looking at nature, looking at the social elements of it. So really integrating sustainability across the board for a real solution, because we're not living in isolation. So those I'd see as the two big kind of future elements of it. But my closing remark is, we all like innovation, but at the end of the day, if you're a business, the risk appetite is not for everybody. It's only the brave who would actually take it up. And therefore, for the ones who are brave, keep at it. And the way to break through all of that, for me, is really about collaboration and building understanding, that people really understand what it's trying to achieve, what are the risks, how do you de-risk it, coming together parties like the financing. If it's too risky, well, it's got to be a blended finance, whether it's a mixture of commercial, government, plus philanthropic. So it's really collaboration that will really break this in terms. But the idea is it doesn't have to be big and scary. Even small innovations, small changes all make a difference. So we should all just keep at it. And the funding will flow, because we keep being told.
Can we hold you to that?
You can hold me to the fact that me and my colleagues will work very hard to make sure that the funds flow. But what we really need is the pipeline also. We need to understand the projects, come to us, tell us what the projects are, because it's with that pipeline of projects that we can actually go out on the back of that and get that. So you have a commitment for us working really hard to get it.
Okay, and that's where the money is. Good to know, everybody. Okay, Alice, finally to you. And Reshma spoke about those who are brave to keep at it. What would your message be as you close to those who are not so brave when it comes to putting up this fight against climate and coming up with solutions, innovations, and scaling what we already have?
I think we are all brave. But I think, of course, the means with which to start to display that brevity may differ. But I've always believed in an engaged society, and I really salute this Ideas Festival because of how many people you're bringing to discuss things. We need to make these things everybody's business. And for me, I believe everyone has a role to play, their own unique role, their own contextual role, informed by where they sit. As they say, everything is from where you sit. And so I believe that everybody has a role to play. Let's bring everybody in. Let's engage our society. Let's engage our citizens. Let them hold their governments accountable. And let's not leave this conversation only in certain spaces. Let's have it in every spaces. But most importantly, whatever we do, the solutions are local. Let's provide that environment for locally led solutions and really, really promote them to the top. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alice. Much appreciated. Thank you so much to all my guests who have contributed to this conversation on climate innovations and solutions. We've had Dr. Patrick Omeja, the field manager at the Biological Field Station at the Makerere University in Uganda. Thank you. Alice Rueza, the African Region Director at WWF International. She joined us virtually today. Professor Mbabu Matthew, the CEO of the Green Blue Foundation. Also, Yvonne Nyokabi, a climate change specialist at UNDP, and Reshma Shah, Director of Sustainability at Equity Group. Thank you all so much. Much appreciated. I'm Smriti Vidyarthi. Thank you for staying with us on this session. I think I'll invite my guests for a photo as Larry then takes over. Thank you. Let's give the guests a round of applause.
Thank you very much for that session. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going for a short break. No, actually a longer break than the previous one. I definitely hope that at least we have got some interesting takeaways the entire morning session. In the afternoon, we are going to be talking about matters climate change, water and resources, which is a very key one as well. And then we are going to be finally closing it up with voices of hope, because it's not all gloom and doom. We've been told that there's some positive things that we are doing. We're doing some things right. So we also need to celebrate that before we close the day. So thank you very much. We're going to be joining you exactly, we can say it is 1:30 now. We'll be back seated and ready for the next session at exactly 2:25. We can agree on that? Thank you very much. So even if you're joining us online at 2:25, we are back for the afternoon session. Thank you very much.